I woke up at 5 a.m. to haul cattle and found the only bridge to my farm chained shut. A woman in a pink suit stood there smiling like she owned my land. She said if I wanted to cross, I'd have to obey her HOA rules. What she didn't know? My family owned the road behind her entire neighborhood. That morning, she thought she was trapping an old rancher in a red striped shirt. She had no idea she was starting a war she couldn't win. Subscribe, because this story gets absolutely insane. At 5 in the morning, my cattle truck rolled to a dead stop in front of a bridge that had carried my family home for 70 years. A brand new steel gate stood across the wooden planks, chained tight, still shining wet under the Montana fog, like somebody had installed it in the dark. Behind me, 40 head of cattle shifted inside the trailer, heavy hooves knocking against metal, while the only road off my farm sat sealed shut with a white sign swinging in the cold wind. Private HOA property. Trespassers will be prosecuted. I sat there for a moment, with both hands on the wheel, wearing the same red striped shirt I wore every auction morning, staring at that sign like it might disappear if I blinked hard enough. The headlights cut through the mist and lit up the bridge boards, the frost on the railing, the fresh tire tracks in the mud. Whoever did this hadn't asked. They hadn't warned me. They'd come while I was sleeping, bolted their authority onto my land, and left me penned in like my own livestock. My name is Ethan Carter, and that bridge was not just a shortcut. It was the only legal crossing between Carter Farm and the county road. My father hauled hay over it. My grandfather drove sheep across it before the highway was paved. My late wife, Rachel, used to stand halfway across every July and take pictures of the creek when the wildflowers came in purple along the banks. Now there was a padlock hanging where my family history used to be. The cattle started bawling behind me, restless from the cold and the stillness. I had a buyer waiting in Billings, a payment due at the bank, and a daughter at Silver Creek Elementary trying to keep her school from being shut down by the same people who had suddenly decided my bridge belonged to them. Lily had told me for weeks that the Silver Pines HOA wanted the old school property for a private clubhouse, but I had not taken it seriously enough. Rich neighborhoods always want more land. I just never thought they would come for mine before sunrise. Then headlights appeared on the far side of the bridge. Not one vehicle, 3. A black SUV, a silver Mercedes, and a county-marked pickup that idled back from the gate like it did not want to be seen too clearly. The SUV door opened first, and out stepped Marjorie Blake, president of the Silver Pines Estates HOA, dressed in a pink suit so bright it looked almost violent against the gray morning. Her blonde hair was pinned tight, her heels sank slightly into the wet gravel, and she carried a leather folder against her chest like a weapon she already knew how to use. Beside her came a narrow-faced attorney in a navy coat, holding papers in a plastic sleeve to protect them from the drizzle. Marjorie did not rush. She walked to the gate with the calm of someone arriving at a ribbon cutting, not a crime scene. When she saw my truck, she smiled without warmth, the kind of smile people use when they have practiced looking reasonable in front of witnesses. I climbed down from the cab. Cold gravel crunched under my boots. The smell of diesel, wet pine, and frightened cattle filled the air as I walked toward the locked gate, my red striped shirt visible under my work jacket. Marjorie looked me over like I was something tracked onto a clean floor. She told me the bridge had been reviewed by the HOA board and determined to be part of Silver Pines Estate's common access infrastructure. Her attorney lifted the papers before I could answer, as if laminated documents could rewrite 70 years of mud, sweat, and county records. I did not raise my voice, not at first. I looked past her at the dark roofs of Silver Pines rising on the hill beyond the creek. All those expensive homes with warm windows and perfect fences, every one of them built long after my family had been here. I thought about Lily sitting at her kitchen table the night before, grading papers she might not get to teach next semester. I thought about the school playground Marjorie wanted scraped flat for a clubhouse pool. I thought about how people like Marjorie never locked a gate unless they believed the person on the other side was too tired, too broke, or too alone to fight back. Marjorie stepped closer to the bars, careful not to get mud on her pink cuffs. She said that if I wanted access through the bridge, I would need to comply with HOA rules, submit an application, and pay the same fees as every other resident. She said it softly, almost sweetly, like she was offering me a polite way to surrender. Behind her, the lawyer watched my face. Behind me, my cattle slammed against the trailer wall, and the sound cracked through the fog like a warning shot. That was when I saw it. A small drone hovered above the cottonwoods on the creek bank, nearly hidden in the morning haze, its tiny red light blinking. Noah, the neighbor kid from the bend in the road, must have launched it from his backyard before school. He was recording everything. The gate, the sign, Marjorie in her pink suit, me standing there in my red striped shirt with a truck full of trapped cattle and nowhere to go. Marjorie noticed my eyes move. Her smile faded just a fraction. Then she turned toward the trees, spotted the drone, and gave her attorney a look that made the air feel colder than the fog. A second later, the county pickup door opened, and a man stepped out holding a set of bolt cutters. But he wasn't walking toward the lock. He was walking toward my fence. By sundown, the bridge was still locked, my cattle were still trapped, and Marjorie Blake's pink-suited shadow was still sitting in my head like a stain I couldn't scrub out. I stood in my barn with my red striped shirt rolled up at the sleeves, listening to the animals shift behind the gates, while the last light of Montana slid through the boards in thin gold stripes. That was when my daughter Lily called and said the school's emergency budget report had numbers that did not belong to any school she had ever worked in. Her voice was low, almost shaking, but not from fear. Lily had her mother's way of getting quiet when she was angry. She told me the Silver Pines HOA had donated to the school foundation for years, at least on paper. But the money had vanished before it reached classrooms, books, repairs, or teacher salaries. The same HOA that locked my bridge was somehow tied to the school budget falling apart. I looked out toward the dark line of the creek and realized Marjorie had not just built a gate across my road. She had placed herself between this town and everything people needed to survive. After Lily hung up, I went to the one place I had avoided for years, the storage room behind my father's old workshop. Dust hung in the air like smoke when I pulled the chain light. Metal shelves lined the walls, stacked with rusted tools, coffee cans full of nails, cracked leather binders, and cardboard boxes marked in my grandfather's handwriting. I had come looking for land records, but what I felt first was grief. My family was everywhere in that room. My grandfather's survey compass, my father's road maps, Rachel's old gardening gloves folded on a crate, still shaped like her hands. I dragged 3 boxes onto the workbench and opened them one by one. The first held tax receipts from the 1970s. The second held irrigation permits, cattle bills, and yellowed photographs of men in work boots standing beside trucks that looked older than memory. The third box was taped shut with cloth tape so brittle it cracked when I touched it. Inside was a red binder with my grandfather's name pressed into the cover. Carter, Access Roads and Easements, 1954. My hands stopped moving. Outside, a gust of wind pushed against the barn doors and made them groan. I opened the binder slowly, and the first page showed a hand-drawn map of Carter Farm before Silver Pines existed. Before the golf course lawns, before the stone entrance signs and white fences and security cameras. There was my farmhouse. There was the creek. There was the bridge. And behind the future neighborhood, running like a forgotten scar through the pine trees, was a thin black line labeled Carter Maintenance Road. I leaned closer, heart beating harder than it should have. The road began at my north pasture, curved behind what was now Silver Pines Estates, and connected to the old county service route on the far ridge. It had been built in the 1950s for fire trucks, cattle haulers, and utility crews during winter floods. My grandfather had granted temporary access for emergency and maintenance use, but the land beneath it had never left the Carter family. Not 1 foot of it, not 1 inch. I spread the maps across the workbench until they covered the wood like evidence in a trial. Old fire access permits, utility approvals, county inspection letters, a waterline agreement from 1962, a power company easement with my father's signature, a cable installation notice from 20 years ago that had been mailed to Rachel, not to the HOA. Page after page showed the same thing in different language. The veins of silver pines ran through Carter land. That was when my phone buzzed again. It was Noah, the kid from the road bend, breathing fast like he was hiding behind something. He sent me a video without saying much. The footage was shaky, shot from above the creek in fading light. 2 men in HOA jackets were pouring fresh concrete beside the locked bridge, smoothing it around a post they had no right to plant. One of them looked over his shoulder every few seconds. The other kept checking his phone. Then the drone tilted, and I saw the county boundary marker half buried beneath wet cement. I watched the clip 3 times without blinking. Marjorie was not just blocking me. She was trying to make the lie permanent before anyone could stop her. A few minutes later, another message came in, this time from a number I did not know. The sender introduced herself as Grace Holloway, a widow who lived in Silver Pines near the back ridge. She wrote that her husband had been on the original neighborhood planning committee before he died, and he had always said there was something wrong about Marjorie's control over the roads. Grace said utility trucks still entered behind her property at night, and Marjorie always told residents it was private HOA infrastructure. But now, after seeing my bridge locked, Grace had started looking through her husband's old files. She sent 1 photo. It showed the back entrance to Silver Pines from the ridge, the road half hidden under pine needles, with a rusted sign nailed to an old post. Carter Road, authorized access only. For the first time all day, I sat down. The barn had gone nearly dark around me. The cattle had quieted. Somewhere outside, the wind moved through the grass, and the locked bridge stood in the distance like Marjorie's victory monument. She thought I was trapped on the wrong side of her gate. She thought an old farmer in a red striped shirt would run out of money, patience, and options. She thought the only road that mattered was the one she had locked. But under my palms, spread across the workbench in ink, stamps, signatures, and 70 years of county paper, was the road she never noticed. And if those documents were right, then every cable, every water main, every emergency route, every delivery truck, and every utility crew serving Silver Pines crossed land that still belonged to me. I looked at my grandfather's map one last time, then at the video of wet concrete swallowing a boundary marker. My hands were steady when I closed the binder. Marjorie Blake had locked my only bridge. By morning, I was going to find out what happened when I locked her entire neighborhood's back door. The first thing I saw that morning was Noah's drone lying in the mud with 1 wing snapped clean off. The second thing I saw was a private security guard standing over a 14-year-old boy like he had just caught a criminal, 1 gloved hand gripping the back of Noah's hoodie while the kid stared at the ground, pale and silent. Behind them, Marjorie Blake stood beside the locked bridge in a bright pink suit, smiling for a local news camera, as if the whole thing had been staged for her good side. I pulled my truck to the shoulder and stepped out slowly, my red striped shirt visible beneath my jacket, the cold Montana wind cutting across the creek hard enough to make the steel gate hum. Overnight, Marjorie had turned the bridge into a fortress. 2 private security SUVs blocked the approach. Fresh steel fencing ran along both sides of the road. Orange construction cones marked off land my family had crossed since before Silver Pines had a single mailbox. The sign on the gate was still there, but now there was another one beneath it, larger and cleaner, warning that the area was under HOA enforcement. Noah looked up when he saw me, and the shame on his face hit harder than anger. He was a skinny kid with dark curls, usually all elbows and nervous energy, the kind of boy who fixed old electronics for neighbors and filmed storms rolling over the ridge because he thought the sky looked like a movie. Now his drone was broken at his feet, his backpack was open in the dirt, and one of Marjorie's guards held the memory card between two fingers like evidence from a crime scene. Noah had been the only reason I had proof they were pouring concrete over my boundary marker. So Marjorie took the proof. The news crew did not point their camera at Noah. They pointed it at Marjorie. She stood perfectly still in that pink suit, gold buttons catching the gray morning light, lips painted the same calm color as if she had never lost a minute of sleep. Her attorney hovered beside her with a folder. A reporter nodded along while Marjorie described me as a hostile landowner creating instability for peaceful families. She said my old truck, my cattle trailer, my muddy boots, even my red striped shirt had become symbols of intimidation to the residents of Silver Pines. She never looked at me while she said it. She looked straight into the camera. I watched the story get built in real time. One frame at a time, they turned the locked bridge into community protection, the broken drone into a safety concern, and a farmer trying to reach his own county road into a threat to civilized living. The security guards shifted their weight when I moved closer, hands resting near their belts, not pulling weapons, just making sure I noticed they had them. Marjorie finally turned her head toward me, and the smile she gave me was small, polished, and private. It was not meant for the cameras. It was meant to tell me she had started something bigger than a gate. Lily arrived minutes later in her little blue sedan, parking crooked near the ditch because the security SUVs blocked the normal turnout. She got out with Grace Holloway beside her, both of them carrying folders from the school board meeting. Lily's face was tight with exhaustion, hair pulled back, teacher badge still clipped to her coat. Grace moved more carefully, a silver-haired widow with sharp eyes and a quiet dignity that made people lower their voices around her. They had spent the night calling parents, comparing budget records, and tracing missing donations that were supposed to keep Silver Creek Elementary open. Now they stood at the edge of Marjorie's press conference and saw exactly where that money had gone. Signs, fencing, attorneys, security, and lies. Marjorie's lawyer handed me a packet through the bars of the gate without stepping too close. The lawsuit was thick, printed clean, and stamped with words designed to scare people who could not afford long fights. It accused me of damaging community aesthetics, interfering with HOA operations, creating public distress, and using agricultural equipment in a manner inconsistent with neighborhood standards. I almost laughed at that last one, because my farm had been there before their neighborhood standards had names. But the laugh never came. Not with Noah standing in the mud. Not with Lily's school on the chopping block. Not with Grace staring at Marjorie like she had finally recognized the shape of a long con. Then an internet service truck rolled up behind the news van, its amber light flashing against the fog. The technician got out, looked at the new fence, looked at me, then looked at the locked bridge with the tired expression of a man who had walked into a problem somebody else created. His name was Caleb Reed, and I had seen him around town running cable lines after storms. He asked who authorized the fence along the rear service corridor. Marjorie snapped her attention toward him so fast her earrings moved. Caleb did not raise his voice. He pointed past the creek, toward the pine ridge behind Silver Pines, and said the main fiber line for the entire neighborhood ran under the old Carter Maintenance Road. Not near it, not beside it, under it. The same corridor the county used for emergency access, the same strip of land my grandfather's binder said still belonged to Carter Ranch. If Marjorie's crew had fenced it, dug near it, or blocked service access without permission, the whole neighborhood could lose internet, emergency communication, and utility repair access with one bad storm. For the first time that morning, Marjorie's face changed. It was quick, barely a flicker beneath the makeup, but I saw it. The pink suit stayed perfect. The posture stayed proud. But her eyes moved to the ridge, then to her attorney, then back to me. I tucked the lawsuit under my arm and said nothing. I did not need to. My anger had gone cold by then, hardened into something useful. While the news camera kept filming her performance at the bridge, I drove straight to the county engineering office with Lily and Grace following behind me. I laid my grandfather's maps, the easement records, and Caleb's utility notes across a metal conference table under fluorescent lights. The county engineer, a gray-bearded man named Russell Vance, studied the documents for a long time without speaking. He traced the old road with one finger, checked the parcel numbers, opened the county GIS map, and then leaned back in his chair. His expression told me the answer before he said a word. The road behind Silver Pines was mine. Not abandoned, not HOA controlled, not community infrastructure. Mine. When I walked back outside, the sky over Silver Creek had turned the color of iron. My phone buzzed with a breaking news alert showing Marjorie at the bridge in her pink suit, calling me a danger to the neighborhood. In the thumbnail, I stood behind the gate in my red striped shirt, framed exactly the way she wanted the town to see me. But now I knew what she did not. She had locked my bridge in front of the cameras, and behind every house she controlled, my road was waiting in the dark. The first call came before sunrise, when the sky over Silver Creek was still black, and the frost on my truck windshield looked like cracked glass. My veterinarian was parked on the county road with a cooler full of vaccines and emergency antibiotics, but Marjorie's steel gate had been locked tighter than ever, wrapped with 2 new chains and a red tag that said access had been suspended for community safety. Behind me, one of my calves was down in the straw, breathing hard, while my cattle trailer sat useless beside the barn, like a promise I could not keep. I stood in the cold, wearing my red striped shirt under my coat, one hand pressed against the sick calf's neck, feeling the heat of fever through its hide. That was the moment the fight stopped being about pride, property lines, or one rich woman's power trip. Marjorie had trapped medicine on the wrong side of a bridge because she wanted me to bow in front of her HOA. She had turned a locked gate into a weapon, and the animal suffering at my feet was the first innocent thing to pay for it. By 7, the sun came up pale and hard over the hills, and Silver Pines woke to the kind of quiet that feels wrong before people understand why. I loaded my grandfather's road documents into the passenger seat, drove my pickup across the north pasture, and followed the old ranch trail toward the pine ridge behind the neighborhood. The hidden road was still there, half buried under needles and shadow, running behind the expensive back fences, like a secret the land had kept for 70 years. I stopped at the entrance, where the old Carter Road sign leaned crooked from its post, and I set my own gate into place with 2 hired welders, a county inspector, and a stack of stamped ownership papers watching every move. The gate was plain steel, nothing fancy, nothing cruel. It stood exactly on my land, across my road, installed with permits Marjorie had never thought I would know how to find. The county inspector checked the parcel map, checked the boundary pins, and signed the form on the hood of my truck. No speeches, no cameras, just ink on paper, frost melting off steel, and the sound of a lock clicking shut on the road Marjorie never noticed. The first thing to fail was the internet. It started as small complaints in the Silver Pines neighborhood group. Frozen screens, failed video meetings, security cameras offline, smart gates not responding. Then the posts turned angry. Parents could not log their kids into online classes. Home offices went dark. Remote workers lost calls. A surgeon who lived on Maple Crest Drive missed a hospital consultation because her fiber connection dropped at exactly 8:43. By 9, the internet service company had trucks stacked at the back ridge, unable to reach their own junction boxes because the maintenance corridor ran behind my new gate. Then came the delivery trucks. A pharmacy van carrying prescriptions for elderly residents hit the blocked service route and reversed awkwardly down the hill. A grocery truck sat at the rear entrance with frozen food thawing in the back. Landscaping crews waited with engines idling, staring at the locked gate like it had fallen from the sky. None of them knew my name at first. They only knew Marjorie Blake had promised them Silver Pines controlled every road, every access point, every inch of the neighborhood's polished little world. By late morning, Marjorie arrived. Her white SUV came fast around the curve, gravel spraying under the tires. She stepped out in a pink suit, brighter than the emergency cones around her, but this time the color did not look like power. It looked like panic trying to dress itself up. Her hair was still perfect, but her jaw was tight, and she kept stabbing at her phone with one manicured finger, while residents gathered behind her fences, whispering from decks and backyards. She saw me standing beside the Carter Road gate in my red-striped shirt, and for the first time since this nightmare began, she did not smile. What she found was not revenge. It was a receipt. I had my deed, my easement history, my county approval, and Russell Vance's engineering confirmation printed and clipped in order. Every utility access point behind Silver Pines crossed Carter land. Every service crew that had been using it for years had done so because my family allowed it, not because the HOA owned it. Marjorie had locked my only bridge and called it enforcement. I had locked my own road and called it boundaries. The moment that made people start filming was not Marjorie shouting. It was Grace Holloway walking out through her back gate with a folder clutched against her chest, her face gray with shock. She moved through the crowd like someone carrying bad news from a hospital. Grace had been digging through HOA financials since dawn, and what she found made the blackout look small. The school donations Lily had been chasing, the maintenance reserves, the emergency infrastructure fund, the clubhouse planning account. Millions of dollars had moved through Silver Pines books like water through a cracked pipe, and almost none of it had landed where residents were told it would. Parents started arriving after that, some from Lily's school, some from Silver Pines, all of them angry in different ways. Lily stood near the road with a group of mothers and fathers who had spent months being told Silver Creek Elementary had no future. They had sold raffle tickets, donated classroom supplies, worked bake sales, and begged for grants while Marjorie's HOA claimed to be supporting the school. Now, Grace's documents showed community education partnerships paid out to vendors nobody recognized, addresses that led to empty lots, and consulting companies tied to people on Marjorie's board. Lily did not cry. She just looked at Marjorie with the kind of hurt that makes a person stand taller. Then Noah appeared at the edge of the crowd with his repaired drone buzzing above him like a tiny witness returned from the dead. Someone had helped him recover the memory card from the broken drone, and now he was live streaming from a borrowed phone taped to the controller. The feed showed the locked bridge, the concrete over my boundary marker, the service trucks blocked at Carter Road, Grace's shaking hands holding bank printouts, and Marjorie in her pink suit, realizing the entire neighborhood was watching in real time. Comments started flooding the screen faster than anyone could read them. People wanted to know why an HOA president could block medicine from a farm. They wanted to know why school money disappeared. They wanted to know why one farmer's road controlled their whole neighborhood. Then the ambulance siren rose from the valley. Everyone turned. The sound came fast, then slowed, then faded into the wrong direction. A resident near the back fence yelled that Mrs. Whitcomb on Cedar Lane had fallen and the ambulance had been rerouted 20 miles around because the rear emergency access was blocked and the bridge dispute had confused dispatch. For one breath, nobody moved. Even Marjorie went still. That was the moment the crowd stopped seeing this as a neighborhood inconvenience and started seeing it as danger with a name attached. I looked at the locked gate, then at Marjorie, then at the residents staring at both of us like we were standing on opposite sides of a fuse. I had never wanted anyone hurt. I had wanted my bridge open, my animals treated, my daughter's school protected, and my land respected. But Marjorie had built a war out of steel and lies, and now the blast radius was reaching people who had trusted her. I unlocked Carter Road for the ambulance before anyone asked. The gate swung open with a long metallic groan, and the crowd parted as if the road itself had come back to life. But as the emergency vehicle finally roared through, Noah's live stream caught Marjorie turning to her attorney, lips barely moving, face white under the makeup. Grace heard what she said, and when Grace looked back at me, the folder slipped from her hands, scattering bank records across the gravel like evidence from a storm. The community center doors were already shaking before I touched the handle. Inside, 300 angry residents were packed shoulder to shoulder beneath buzzing fluorescent lights, their voices rising like thunder trapped in a wooden box. While Marjorie Blake stood at the front of the room in a pink suit so polished it looked almost unreal against the panic around her. On the wall behind her, the Silver Pines HOA logo glowed from a projector screen, but nobody was looking at the logo anymore. They were looking at the locked doors, the police cruiser outside, and the woman who had told them for years that everything was under control. I walked in wearing my red striped shirt, carrying my grandfather's land binder under one arm and the Carter Road documents under the other. The room shifted when people saw me. Some residents stared, like I was the reason their internet had gone down, their deliveries had stopped, and their ambulance had been delayed. Others looked at me like I was the first honest thing they had seen all week. I could feel both kinds of judgment on my skin as I made my way down the aisle, past parents from Lily's school, past elderly couples clutching HOA envelopes, past Noah standing near the AV table with a laptop open and his repaired drone resting beside it like a wounded bird that had learned how to fly again. Marjorie struck the table with a small wooden gavel, and the sound snapped through the room like a dry branch breaking. She tried to speak over the crowd, tried to frame the emergency meeting as a response to outside agitation, rural hostility, and dangerous misinformation. Her voice had that smooth, expensive calm I had heard at the bridge, but now it kept catching at the edges. Her pink suit was still perfect, but her hands were not. One thumb rubbed hard against her ring finger over and over, like she was trying to erase something invisible. Grace Holloway sat in the front row with a banker's box at her feet. She looked smaller than usual under the harsh lights, but when Marjorie mentioned responsible financial leadership, Grace stood. The room quieted before she said anything. Maybe it was the way she held herself. Maybe it was the folder in her hands. Maybe everyone could feel that whatever came next was going to change the ground beneath them. Grace placed the first stack of papers on the table. Bank transfers, vendor invoices, HOA ledgers, school partnership reports. She'd spent the entire afternoon tracing the numbers, and what she found was not mismanagement. It was design. Payments for landscaping had gone to a company registered to Marjorie's cousin in another state. Security contracts had been paid to an address that turned out to be an empty storage unit. The school support fund Lily had fought for had been drained through administrative consulting fees, while Silver Creek Elementary held bake sales to buy printer paper. The room did not explode at first. It went silent in the worst way, the kind of silence that comes when people realize they've been paying for their own betrayal. Lily stood beside Grace, pale but steady, her teacher badge still clipped to her cardigan. Parents turned toward her as if they finally understood why the school's budget had never made sense. For months, they had been told there was no money, no option, no future for the little school at the edge of town. Now they were staring at records showing their children's classrooms had been treated like a funnel into private accounts. A father near the aisle buried his face in one hand. A mother whispered that her son's music program had been cut for this. That was the moment, I think, the room stopped seeing Marjorie as a strict HOA president and started seeing her as someone who had taken food from tables she never had to sit at. Marjorie moved fast then, not toward Grace, but toward the narrative. She called the documents stolen, incomplete, misunderstood, manipulated by people who hated community standards. She pointed at me without looking directly into my eyes and tried to make me the center of the fire. The farmer, the outsider, the man in the red striped shirt who had blocked their service road and caused chaos. For a few seconds, I felt the room tilt back toward me, because fear is easy to redirect when people are tired and angry. Then Noah hit play. The projector flickered once, and the HOA logo vanished. In its place appeared drone footage from the bridge, shaky at first, then clear. There was Marjorie in her pink suit before dawn. There were her workers dragging the steel gate into place. There was the county boundary marker beside the bridge. There was wet concrete being poured around it while one man looked over his shoulder and another held a phone to his ear. Then the video cut to a closer angle, audio rough but clear enough for every person in that room to hear Marjorie instructing them to make the access look permanent before I could file an objection. The sound that came from the crowd was not shouting, not yet. It was a collective breath, sharp and horrified, like everyone had stepped to the edge of a cliff at the same time. Noah stood frozen beside the laptop, his face red, his broken drone repaired with tape and stubbornness beside his hand. A woman in the back yelled that Marjorie had called the boy a vandal. Someone else shouted that she had used HOA security to seize a child's property. Then the room erupted so hard, the projector screen trembled against the wall. Marjorie grabbed the microphone, but feedback screamed through the speakers and swallowed her voice. Residents were on their feet now, holding up bills, letters, fee notices, late penalties, photographs of unfinished repairs and broken promises. Grace opened the banker's box and pulled out more files. Secret accounts, fake contracts, missing reserve funds, payments routed through shell companies. Every paper hit the table like another nail in the coffin Marjorie had built for herself. Then the back doors opened. Sheriff Daniel Mercer walked in with 2 deputies, followed by a woman in a charcoal coat carrying a state financial investigator badge. The room folded into a stunned hush. Marjorie turned toward them, and for the first time all night, her face lost its shape. Not dramatically, not like in movies. It simply emptied. The confidence drained out of her eyes and left behind a woman in a pink suit standing alone in front of 300 people who finally knew what she had done. The investigator did not raise her voice. She read the charges cleanly, each word landing in the quiet. Fraud, embezzlement, falsified contracts, obstruction, destruction of property records, and conspiracy to interfere with emergency access. Marjorie's attorney stepped forward, then stopped when the deputy raised a hand. The handcuffs came out with a small metallic click that somehow carried over every breath in the room. Marjorie looked at me then, not at Grace, not at Noah, not at the residents whose money had vanished. At me. Her eyes were wet with fury, not regret. I held my grandfather's binder against my chest and thought about my sick calf, Lily's school, Noah standing in the mud, Grace's shaking hands, and every family who had paid into a lie while being told it was community. As they led her past me, her pink sleeve brushed my red-striped shirt. For 1 second, all the noise disappeared, and I saw exactly what she had never understood. She had thought land was something you could take with paperwork, pressure, and a camera crew. But land remembers. People remember. And sooner or later, even a locked bridge leads back to the truth. When the doors closed behind her, the room stayed silent. Then Lily's school board chair stood up, face streaked with tears, and asked my daughter to help lead Silver Creek Elementary through the crisis Marjorie had created. Grace was nominated as temporary community chair before she even sat back down. Noah's live stream had passed 50,000 viewers, and half the town was calling him the kid who exposed Silver Pines. For the first time in days, I thought it might be over. Then my phone vibrated. It was an unknown number, sending one photo. My farmhouse at night, taken from the edge of my pasture. Under it were 5 words. You arrested the wrong woman. The photo of my farmhouse did not lead to another war. It led to Marjorie's brother, a quiet contractor named Wade Blake, who had been hiding behind her shell companies, moving stolen HOA money through fake repairs, fake security invoices, and fake school consulting fees. He was arrested 3 nights after the meeting, not in a pink suit under bright cameras like Marjorie, but in work boots behind a storage unit, trying to burn boxes of records while red and blue lights washed over the snow like judgment finally arriving. For a while, Silver Creek did not celebrate. We just breathed. The kind of breathing people do after a storm rips the roof off and somehow leaves the family alive underneath. Marjorie's name disappeared from the Silver Pines sign within a week, but the damage she left behind sat everywhere. Unpaid vendors, broken trust, angry neighbors, parents who had spent years wondering why their children's school kept losing money, while HOA fees kept climbing. Every meeting after that first one felt like walking through a room full of cracked glass. Nobody wanted to step wrong. Nobody wanted to be fooled again. 6 months later, the community center looked different. Not richer, cleaner, more honest. The new HOA board posted every receipt online, every contract was voted on in public, and Grace Holloway sat at the front table with reading glasses low on her nose, asking questions sharp enough to make grown men sit straighter. She had become the kind of leader Marjorie pretended to be, steady, transparent, and allergic to nonsense. People trusted her not because she demanded it, but because she earned it one plain answer at a time. Lily saved Silver Creek Elementary. That sentence still makes my throat tighten. The school board did not just keep the doors open. They asked her to become principal after the investigation exposed how badly the old funding agreements had been poisoned. On her first morning, I watched her stand on the front steps in a blue dress, greeting kids with one hand and wiping her eyes with the other when the kindergarten class ran past her, carrying handmade signs that said, "We love our school." Parents who used to whisper in fear now showed up with paint rollers, repaired playground swings, and boxes of donated books. The building still had old floors, drafty windows, and a heater that groaned like a tired mule. But it was alive. Noah became a local legend by accident, which is the only way a good kid ever becomes one. His live stream had been shared across Montana, then across the country, and suddenly the boy whose drone had been broken in the mud was being asked to speak at the school's technology fair. He did not act like a hero. He still looked embarrassed when people clapped, but when Lily handed him a scholarship from the new Community Transparency Fund, his mother cried so hard, Grace had to hug her with both arms. As for the bridge, the county repaired it in early June. They stripped the illegal gate, replaced the damaged rails, pulled Marjorie's steel posts from the ground, and uncovered the boundary marker her crew had tried to bury in concrete. I stood there in my red striped shirt while the workers cleared the last of it, watching sunlight hit the creek below for the first time without a chain between me and the road. The sound of that water under the planks almost broke me. For months, I had carried anger like a tool I could not put down. That morning, listening to the creek, I finally felt my hands loosen. The signing happened on the hood of my truck. Grace brought the documents, Russell Vance brought the county seal, and Lily brought a pen from the school office because she said something good ought to come from a place we almost lost. I signed a permanent community access agreement for Carter Road, allowing emergency vehicles, utility crews, and residents to use the back route free of charge forever, as long as it remained public, transparent, and never controlled by a private HOA board again. People expected me to charge fees. Some even told me I deserved to. Maybe I did. But I had spent too many nights staring at a locked bridge to become the kind of man who made others beg for a road home. The summer festival started at dusk. Nobody planned for it to become something big. It began with a few tables near the bridge, a grill in the pasture, and someone stringing yellow lights from fence post to fence post. Then the whole town showed up. Kids ran across the bridge laughing, their sneakers thumping over the planks that once held a chain and a threat. A country band played from a hay trailer near the barn. Smoke from the barbecue drifted through the cottonwoods. Elderly residents from Silver Pines sat beside ranch hands from the valley, sharing lemonade, stories, and the strange relief of surviving the same lie from different sides. They unveiled the new sign just before sunset. Carter Bridge. The letters were carved into dark wood, simple and strong, mounted where Marjorie's warning sign used to hang. I stared at it longer than I meant to. My father's hands had repaired those boards. My grandfather's truck had crossed that creek before half the county had paved roads. My wife had loved that view in summer. For a long time, that bridge was just part of the farm. Then it became a weapon against me. Now, somehow, it had become a promise. Grace came to stand beside me while the band played soft behind us. She wore a pale green dress and held 2 paper cups of lemonade, one for her and one for me. The last light caught in her silver hair, and for a second she looked younger than grief, younger than all the years Marjorie had stolen from the neighborhood. She said I had not just saved my farm. I had saved a community that had forgotten how to trust itself. I wanted to answer, but my chest was too full, so I just looked at the bridge and nodded. Lily stood on the other side with Noah and a crowd of school kids, all of them waving at me like I had done something larger than protect a road. Maybe that was the part I had never understood. Sometimes you fight because someone locks your gate. But if you keep going long enough, you find out there were other people trapped behind different gates, waiting for someone to cut the first chain. The sun dropped behind the Montana hills, turning the creek gold beneath Carter Bridge. I stood there in my red striped shirt, boots in the dust, the music rising behind me, and the lights glowing across the farm. For the first time in a long time, I did not feel like I was guarding what was left. I felt like I was finally coming home. In the end, this story reminds us that protecting what is right does not always require anger. Sometimes it only takes patience, courage, and the truth held firmly in your hands. In daily life, we may not face a locked bridge or a powerful HOA, but we all face moments when someone tests our boundaries or tries to make us feel small. When that happens, stay calm, stand your ground, and trust that honesty still matters. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs strength today. Comment what you would have done in Ethan's place, and subscribe for more stories like this. May God bless you and everyone watching.